And I learned that Hosanna in the original Hebrew meant it's a cry for help. It is save us. It is I am low and I don't know where I'm going, so please God, come and help me. And then somewhere in the transliteration, because it doesn't really translate to anything but Hosanna in Greek, it becomes a cry of happiness. Palm Sunday. We take a break from looking at the characters of the Old Testament that we're going through on a regular basis on Sunday morning to step into the week of Jesus, right? And it begins here at Palm Sunday with him riding into Jerusalem being praised. And today I want to talk a little bit more about what Bethany was talking about with the kids and the two meanings of Hosanna. And I think to do that properly, we need to look at etymology, right? Etymology is the study of words and their meanings and how those have changed over time. For example, the words sleigh and bussin mean a little bit different things today to our teenagers than they did to my grandparents, right? Or if you grew up in my house, we didn't have a swear jar, we had a whatever jar. Because whatever can mean indifference to what kind of restaurant you want to go to, but it can also, in the right context, if you just, well, whatever, like you could just blow someone off and it can be indifference to someone around you. Or, in my case, I grew up kind of home base was the Pacific Northwest. And one of the words that we used on a regular basis was dude. I still do on a regular basis. And if we look at the etymology of that, it comes from dandy, or a gentleman who is dressed up to the nines, who is dapper, right? Well, that's not really how I use it. Earlier this morning, I passed someone in the hall and I said, "What's up, dude?" Right? Little greeting. Here we go. My kids also know that if they do something that's improper and I say, "Dude," they know. They know that whatever they did just is not exactly what they should be doing at that moment, right? So we have this etymology of words, and we understand that different words mean different things in different times, and depending on how we actually speak them, they can mean a lot of different things in context. And so what does that have to do with our readings today? Well, as we look at this reading of Jesus riding into Jerusalem, we see that the story itself is contained in all four Gospels, right? And there's only 11 narratives. There's only 11 stories that are shared by all four Gospels. So right there, we need to realize that this is an important event in the life of Jesus. And then as we dive a little bit deeper, and as I was looking at these texts, I realized that 3 of the 4 use the word Hosanna, right? Luke kind of bypasses it, but the other 3 use the term Hosanna. So it's got to mean something important to the people who are around Jesus. So I dove a little bit deeper, and I went to a website that I use for original languages. And I learned that Hosanna in the original Hebrew meant it's a cry for help. It is save us. It is I am low and I don't know where I'm going, so please God, come and help me. And then somewhere in the transliteration, because it doesn't really translate to anything but Hosanna in Greek, it becomes a cry of happiness, a shout for joy, an exclamation of, hey, this is going great. And God, you are good. And so as we look at this story of the people who are connecting with Jesus, we need to realize that he sees their hosannas. He sees that as those crowds are gathering, not everyone has a shout for joy. that there are people in the mix who are crying out, save us, help us, we need you. I think if we look at this story and we kind of step into those shoes, we too can say that there are people around us who have both those hosannas. The hosanna that says, man, life is good, God, you are great, and I thank you. I thank you for being you and what you've done for me. And then there are also people who are saying, Hosanna, man, I need help. I am stuck. There is something there that is causing me to despair. Hosanna, come, save me. And we could speculate on all kinds of things that could be sticking us in that kind of Hosanna that is a cry for help. Could be just hard things that are happening in life. It could be lies, it could be deceptions, it could be all kinds of things. But whatever it is, we know there are people out there who are saying, save us. Well, the great thing is that God hears the cries of the people who are around him in Jerusalem, and he also hears our cries of Hosanna as well. Whether that is we are at a place where we need help, or is it at a place where we are just overjoyed with life and where things are. He hears that. And I think it'd be really easy to stop right there and say, yes, okay, as you go through this week, God hears your hosannas. Lift them up no matter how you go. But I think there's more to the story as we think about it, especially if your hosanna is sitting here and is a cry for help. You see, God created us in amazing ways. And one of those ways is that he gave us a brain that can actually reprogram itself in some ways. And it's called neuroplasticity, right? So it's the ability for our brain to be able to reconnect some things to help us when we are in a spot of despair. When we are in a spot of our Hosanna being down and save us, that helps us move into a point where we can see. We may not feel it, but we can see where we could have a Hosanna that is saying, God, you are good. And so as we look at Jesus and how he created us, we see that he created part of our brain to be logical, to just think really logical. And when we get into despair, there is part of us that just kind of grabs onto that logic, and it keeps on holding on. And then he created our feeling side of the brain, and as we feel things, we begin to process them, and we begin to see how they impact our lives. Well, as we look at these and we look at the two hosannas, we know that there is something through research and psychology that if we take our laments, if we say, God, our hosanna is actually a cry for help, and we write down what that cry for help is, something happens in our brain that helps us release just a little bit and gain a little bit of perspective. And it's not the panacea. It's not going to erase everything, but it begins to help us reframe and see how God can actually help us in those moments of having a hosanna that's a cry for help. But the other thing that we can do to help reconnect and kind of circuit our brain is this, is we can be thankful. Now, not just be thankful, like say it, but actually writing it down. Because as we physically write down information, we begin to process it in a really unique way that helps us reconvene some circuits. And it helps us see life in a little bit different manner. And so as you go through and you write down 3 things that you're thankful for every day, you begin to rewire. You begin to see that God has made us in a way that we don't have to sit and say, here's a plea and a cry for help. Yes, we can lament. Yes, life is hard. Yes, there are things around us that are weighing heavy on us. But that's not the end of the story. And the way that God created us, he created us in a way that, yes, we can be lamenting, but we can also be thankful. And we can begin to see what it is that he's done and who he is in our lives because we lift up these thanksgivings, these hosannas of, yes, God, you are here. And so my prayer for you this week, as you go from here and you look at Thursday and the Passover meal and Jesus communing with his disciples and what that means for us, into Friday and the heaviness of the cross, but then the celebration on Sunday as we see an empty tomb, is that we're able to process that in our own hosannas. That we're able to see if we are down and we are crying for help. That there is love and there is forgiveness to help you. Right? And we can lament, but also, if we can find those things to be thankful for, we can begin to change the story just a little bit in our own brains. And that is an amazing thing. And there's no other animals that they've found that can do this and kind of rewire. And so this week, as you go, if you're lamenting and your cry of Hosanna is a cry of help me, my challenge to you is lament. Write down what it is that you're lamenting. Take that time every day. But don't sit there. Also, take time when you're done with your lament to write down 3 things that you're thankful for. 3 things that have encouraged you that day. Or 3 things that you can see around you that are beautiful. And if you don't know where to start by thanking God for who he is. Start for thanking him for Jesus and that ride and that story of this week that brings us to see an empty tomb and the promises fulfilled. Begin to see what he has done for you so that you can be thankful for what you see around you. And if your hosannas are in this realm of life is good and man, we are rejoicing and this is where we are, write down those 3 things that you're thankful for every day as well, because that keeps your brain fresh. It keeps you having a perspective of being in God's grace. It keeps a perspective of seeing Jesus and the world around us and how amazing that is. And so as you go, whether your Hosanna is a cry for help or if it's a cry of happiness, my hope is that you're able to take time this week and you're able to process through what Jesus has done for you. And that by Sunday, you can see a point where you can have a cry of happiness for that empty tomb. Amen.